And you heard in the president's remarks there him referencing a South Carolina representative. We have him with us right now, joining us on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus. Brandon Guffey joining us. Thank you so much for taking the time. You were there in the Rose Garden as that measure was being signed into law, and we've talked about your push for years now to try to strengthen some of these protections online and punishments online for people who try to take advantage of folks via this sextortion and other measures. Could you tell us how you were feeling being there alongside the president as he was signing this measure, which was we discussed before, overwhelmingly passed in Congress? Folks really wanted to see this measure done.
Yeah, it's overwhelming for me as a representative to think, 2.5 years ago, whenever I kind of made this my passion to be sitting at the White House and having, the First Lady as such a big advocate and so many senators. I mean, it passed 99 senators out of the Senate. So, only one person really opposing the bill. And to think that we have come that far is just overwhelming, but it's showing what a major problem this is across the country and why we need to address it.
Yeah, and some of the measures that we see within the legislation, prison fines are both for folks who violate this law, restitution, the fact that there are restrictions or essentially requirements for websites to comply and their timelines. For example, within 48 hours, certain videos have to be taken down if victims request this. This is, just one stab at trying to conquer what we are learning to be a pretty big problem. We've seen, as far as recent reporting, the FBI reporting over 13,000 cases of sextortion between October of 2021 and March of 2023. So we know this is a big problem out there. And you've been very candid about why this is such a near and dear cause to your heart, and that's the loss of your son. And we're so sorry that you had to go through that. But can you talk about how that loss has really fueled this push for you to want to make some changes?
Well, I think as with anyone who loses a child, and it's one thing to lose a child, but it's another to know that your child chose to take their life. The most important thing is, I will fight until the day that I die to make sure that another child does not feel that way, that is the only option. And, just to be honest, if we're not fighting to protect this next generation, then what are we even doing? It baffles me at the amount of people that can sit here and argue to remove a book from a library because they claim parental rights. But whenever we start talking about protecting kids online, they want to start screaming First Amendment, First Amendment. We've got to start standing up and doing what's right to protect our next generation. And I believe that starts with ensuring that our kids are protected online and we don't have predators from another country like that attacked my son coming into his bedroom while the family's asleep at night.
And we know that not only have you pushed for legislation and changes on that front, but we also know that you've filed a suit against Meta, saying that there wasn't enough done. There are not enough protections in place on that front as far as protecting younger users. It just feels like there are so many different avenues that parents and I guess even at this point government are trying to handle, to take on, just to try to make sure that not only our young people, but folks across the nation are better protected from predators, if you will. Can you talk about just trying to wrap your arms around such a large issue for so many folks?
Well, it's very difficult whenever you've had 25 years to protect kids online and you've done nothing. And that's the case that we're in. In 1996, they passed the COPA law, which basically says that anyone 13 or older, these companies cannot be held liable for what's put on their website. And that is ridiculous. Everything else we judge by 18 and under. Take it down as a huge first step to allow, if these images get posted, to not only criminally punish the person that posts them up to 3 years if it's a minor, um, but in addition to force these companies to have to pay a fine if they don't take them down. The sad part is these big tech companies, these are the world's richest companies, and they're aware of the problems and they have done nothing to implement true change. I use the example often of Meta pulling down 63,000 sextortion accounts in one day from one country, that was Lagos, Nigeria, and just off of Instagram. Now, did they do that to keep those platforms or to build it up and find out these were sextortionists just so they could get a good PR stunt and remove them in one day? Or did they have the capability to truly remove them all in one day? Either way, they're a bad actor because nothing's been done since. They're only interested in profit, and we've got to learn to protect our kids online. And everyone can say this is a parent's job to do so, but there's no law to keep a child from going into a Walmart and buying a device on their own, setting up an entire account at 13 years of age. And there's nothing that a parent can do to stop it. At least take it down will be a tool and a step in the right direction. And not only for real images, but for artificial intelligent images as well, which we are seeing a huge rise in. So I'm very grateful that they're seeing that, but we still have a long way to go to protect children online.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of which, what would you like to see done next? You said this is a great first step. What would be a second step perhaps for you, or even a third step if you want to even go down that road further? Just curious as far as policy.
There's a few different policies. Number one, I would love to see Section 230 repealed. If these companies could be held liable, then they would make the changes immediately. But they put so much money into lobbying. I think it was $500 million last year in trying to kill the Kids Online Safety Act. It's very difficult to fight against things like that. I think the next step would be an App Store Accountability Act, which I've introduced in South Carolina as well, which basically says you have three app stores, Apple, Google, and Amazon, and the parent should be able to choose by giving the age whenever they're setting up a phone. And if it is an app that is not appropriate for someone that is under the age of 18, then it's not available to that child. There's no questions asked. How do you allow a child to sign a contract to agree to these terms and conditions without getting a parent's input to begin with? I often say that big tech is the equivalent of big tobacco of this generation. And I think that's the perfect example. What did we do whenever we saw that cigarettes were causing so much harm? We were still dealing with a big lobby coming out against us. But what we had to do was we had to age gate it. We had to issue warnings, and then we had to educate. And awareness is 90% of the battle. The problem is people don't understand how dangerous this is until it hits home.
I mean, we've done a lot of reporting recently, and specifically, I can think back to a special that we had here on WCNC Plus back in January during Human Trafficking Awareness Month, where we dove into some of the statistics and we spoke with experts. And I remember sitting down with a founder of essentially a nonprofit in our area that helps survivors, teen girls specifically, who are survivors of sex trafficking and exploitation. And I remember she shared with me that pretty much anywhere online that people can communicate, have a chat, any sort of messaging is where they're seeing predators trying to access these children. And I think that really astounded me to hear. And I feel like that's kind of going in hand with some of the discussions that we're seeing right now to try to curb social media use. And so I guess curious on your take, over the years of how your view might have evolved regarding social media, online access. I feel like there was a point in time where, the web was a wide world of, new ideas and such. And I think now we're starting to get an idea that there's a dark side to things as well.
Well, I mean, it's no different than whenever, I grew up in the 80s and it was nothing for you to walk a mile to school out on a main road. And then you started seeing all the kidnapping stories. And the reason the kidnappers were there is because kids were there. And I think it's the same thing with being online, whether it's on a gaming profile or not. But bottom line is, if we had the age of the people who are on there or on that platform, we wouldn't have to worry about whether they are, playing with other friends or you're allowing adults to come in here. And I know that becomes a murky, I'm more of a libertarian, so it becomes murky in trying to do something like that. Um, and that's the reason I think things such as the App Store, whenever you're setting up a phone, because it's linked directly with your IMEI. In addition, I am working, the company that I work for is called CyberDive out of Arizona, and they're a startup tech company that is essentially giving the children the ability to have a phone, but the parent can see everything that's on the screen without having to get app permissions. And I believe that is one of the ways to go about it, because it's similar to whenever we passed a seatbelt law. Immediately, if you were 16, whenever the seatbelt law passed, you had a hard time following that law. But if you were raised from the early childhood age and you were brought up wearing a seatbelt, then you knew to protect yourself. So I think devices like that are another way for us to train. But ultimately, it boils down to education and awareness, and ensuring that the companies that are providing these services are at least doing what they can to protect children. And what we've seen through whistleblowers is they are going just the opposite way. They are aware of the problems and they could care less about solving the problem.
If I could, I did want to ask you if you had an update on the criminal case regarding your son, because at last check back in January, we had reported that there was someone who was extradited from Nigeria being held responsible for eventually, unfortunately, and as we said, heartbreakingly so, your son taking his own life. Is there anything upcoming with that case? Because I think at last check we saw that there was an indictment, but are there any developments coming up soon?
Yeah, there is a pretrial hearing coming up on the 24th. But that doesn't mean that his attorneys aren't going to request more time. But I do have that marked on my calendar right now for that pretrial hearing, because he did plead not guilty. So therefore he could, really be trying to, I guess, bolster his case. And I can't really go into too much more detail than that because of the trial, if that makes sense.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with before we let you go tonight, either about this topic, about the case itself, as we just referenced, anything you'd like to share with folks who are watching here on Live Impact News?
My personal message, whether it is, teens, number one, I would like to say that, look, you're not perfect. No one is. You're going to make mistakes. And for us parents, we really need to understand and we need to relearn what grace is, because we have gotten to this point to where we act as if we are perfect and we haven't made mistakes. But bottom line is we are all going to fall short. We're always going to fall short and make mistakes. And the only time in life that you're carried is the day that you die. Imagine if you just had 6 people to help lift you up and be there for you as you made a mistake. This world could be such a better place. And just understand that the mistakes that you make are not going to define who you are, but help you become the person that you're meant to be.
An incredible message. We appreciate you taking the time. Representative Brandon Guffey joining us from D.C., we believe, still at this point. And
yes.
We always appreciate your candor and taking the time to speak about what we know is a very difficult situation for your family, but obviously one that has spurred a drive to change things and prevent it from happening to other folks. So thank you so much.
Well, y'all are such a big part in raising that awareness. Without being able to talk, I can't tell you how many times I have a conversation, and just by someone seeing or hearing something, it saves kids' lives, and that's what it's about.
Yeah. All right. Indeed. Thank you so much. We're going to sign off with you here on Live Impact News on WCNC Plus, and keep us posted. Anything developing on all of your fronts. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.